recordamos, Houston, can you hear me? Houston, can you hear me?
Yes.
Juro lealtad a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América y la república que representa, una nación bajo Dios, indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos. Honro la bandera de Texas. Te juro lealtad, Texas. Un estado bajo Dios, uno e indivisible. Se levanta en el mástil mi bandera, como un sol entre ciegros y trinos. Muy adentro, en el templo de mi veneración, oigo, siento, contento latir mi corazón. Es mi bandera, la enseña nacional. Es mi bandera, la enseña nacional. Desde niños sabemos venerarla y también, por su honor, vivir. El conocimiento de sí mismo nos inclina hacia un edificio de cuáles somos en épige. Maltratado. En reverso, como las manos del reloj apuntando de dónde vine, desde ese edificio, del lodo, áspero, con pedazos de la misma tierra donde te paras ahora mismo. Me quedo empapado con las expectativas porque siempre habrá alguien más que tú. Que mis ojos se enfoquen, que sus aperturas ondulan para terminar bastantes abiertos para dejar entrar esta luz y bastantes cerrados para no dejar entrar esta luz. Mi recuerdo con mucha vergüenza la pena de niño ñoño alimentado por el pan de la hostia y del agua bendita, como alguien abandonado en una célula, núcleo, vibrando con pensamientos y esa misma vergüenza ahora, décadas después, recordándome como se decía a mi alrededor, 40, como si fuera un insulto, sabiendo bien que nuestras familias venían de allí. Bolillo, the less than sympathetic term for white people, replacing gringo, which took on a more technical term, as in, this is a Mexican and this is a gringo. The name for a specific Mexican bread associated with menudo to soak up the blood red. Or stuffed with avocado in a natural, calm green. Taken care of, all will be fine. A soft white bread with a thin crust smirking with a guilty pleasure without much to it. The insult for white presenting, long before coconut fell from the tongue. Se cree tanto. Something to dodge, something to prove you're not, something to use as your own in an arsenal of weapons you better use as your own. Before its maw is open to you, looking at you, licking its lips to soak up the blood red, a guilty pleasure with so much to it because you secretly project its harm away. This bread made across that border in my uncle's bakery. Sweet smells swallowed distinctly, all of this consumed while the body is still warm. That novelty, when will it wear off and recede like ocean revealing a sandy scalp? This longest of tides with tree rings marking when water last lapped at my toes. Society's chickens come home to roost, but for how long before that factory farm puts the product to market and palms its tax-free profit? How long can that ivory structure be distracted before its own reflection and its Alzheimer's compassion? Stop flipping back to a previous page to compare. Even when Latin TV pauses the blonde pond that it soaks in to share something more in line with the brown eyes that are watching it, how long will the pause? Is it more like a breath of a sigh? Or that of a child bobbing up from a pool, eyelashes glued together with water, hair plastered to their smooth scalps, stinking of chlorine and gasping like newborns? Unless it's quite stark, I don't tend to notice actors' eye color. Not because I can't appreciate, but because it depreciates over time. And it was never about their eyes, but ours. When you have to go somewhere else, to see who you are, to see where you are, there's an immediate sense of standing on a mirror, looking down at yourself, looking up at yourself. I catch that disorientation. I feel that earth below hurtling the vacuum while it spins. feel it hurtling as that vacuum makes it spin, trying so hard to fling us off of it. Seeing murals that tell a story that I should know like the back of my hand. It makes me look down at the front of my hand, trying to compare the work that it's made, while surrounded by one work that spans not only the history I should acknowledge, but the history of that adulterous hand that was at work on that very wall not that long ago. You see, that wall speaks parts of my history that I wouldn't speak about. That split lineage that forks at one bloody spot where blood had already been spilt before, it speaks to that tongue that roots in my mouth, down to the spot where that root burrows and pretends to be a different kind of worm. But this wall, it splays it open, using every part so it isn't wasted. It honors, and it says a prayer to every part, even the diseased and parasitic, wrapped up in sinews of tissue paper spotted with historians' fingerprints, my credulous eyes, my grandfather's burned scalp, mother's Mona Lisa lips, the abuela's weakened grip, grandma's forgiving pause. My brother proudly announced to me that in his retirement, he had followed our family tree back to some roots that I wish I had never even sprouted from. Even if that means that I wouldn't be here to write this today. That they had rotted in the ground before the wind carried that seed over the sea and made me ashamed of something, a sin so original that I'm born with it. He proudly announced that we sprouted from Columbus and Cortez, as if he has an amnesia about who the rest of him is, what that brown body of his means. I know I can't pass for white, and I haven't looked at my own palms for fear of confronting their absence of melanin. But he has forced my gaze with an oblivious cruelty, and I stare at their pale past and read the lines that map out a way out in the future. He's the one who brought conservatism to my family in his older age, just like he was the one who brought Eurocentricity to us after traveling to England in college. A royal lace collar, framed, hung in our dining room, holding court. At the head of the table, Thanksgiving, Navidad, cenas, familia, betrayed by that lace. He's the one, now as a retired physician, who has a home where he plans to spend the rest of his days in the heart of Mexico, at the edge of waters that possibly could have once been under the wooden vessels that carried those murderers to this continent in the first place. He's the one who acted like a second father to a brother born when he was already an adult. His compassion and open heart, like reflective surfaces, bounce back rays of light to tan this little brown boy. He's the one who is poisoned by success and money, wasteful, deliberate, camel, eye of the needle, losing sight of a church pew, even as he sits in it. He is the same energy that will study energies, acupuncture, and the East attest to things that are wrong in the church's eyes while using those church pews as kindling for a witch's last fire. He's the man who dare not admit he's gay in certain crowds. He is a man of science amongst those who deny it. And I am the man who incredulously watched that evolution to a flow blind. A man. I am a man. I'm a man still caught up in reflections of light, who became browner in and out, doing different things with lace, laid over a sense of betrayal, using stoic eyes to build up my defenses, an outer shell that dulls disappointment, And I am even now still a man, daring not to admit in certain crowds where the pale of my palms have bruised. Vaguely remember the hour. 7 years old, summer vacation, and I have the luxury of traveling, the privilege to get out of El Paso for a bit, to visit my brother in San Antonio. From one very Mexican Texas town to another, whose name also comes out of a Mexican-shaped mouth. Leaving one group of people who revel in our own stereotypes for another, who bond in depreciation. But what about those kids who, hearing about others' moms converting chanclas as tools for discipline when their mothers instead wore sensible shoes? They just smile along to get along all along, feeling like they're not Mexican enough. I can always see it in their darting eyes, hear it in their laugh that didn't quite hear but desperately wants to react to the joke. This brown boy's melanin sizzled darker in that scorching Texas sun that summer. With weeks spent swimming, getting darker and darker, than many who are labeled wetbacks for swimming much less. Walk up to the Alamo, that symbol of all Texas symbols, a monument to white supremacy stealing spaces from the people to their south, squatting a land that their own ancestors were not buried in yet, but taught to little brown boys as something to be revered. And we believed it because it's not just who writes history that gets to tell the story, but who it gets taught to that counts. It's an unassuming ruin. It's barely fitting within the eyes of a child. It whispers under its breath, remember this is our state. Remember that we took this place by force. Remember that your place, and remember that your people are the terrorists for shedding blood on the only land they had ever known. Almost 47 years old, still living like it's summer vacation, but staying out of the sun, because of cancer. So, not nearly as brown. This not nearly as brown man living an hour from San Antonio can even see from here how small and petty that monument really is. That old Spanish mission, whose mission was to teach natives to cross their right hand from their forehead to their chest, to their heart to the right, tries to assert itself in a plaza, in a city where we all still love our own stereotypes, and sits crumbling before our very eyes. Houston, do you hear me? Houston, do you hear me?
been thinking a lot about faces. I think because I've been so desperate to see them. And I should mention that I'm very happy to see your half faces here. Faces went then to screens, and then mirrors, and then things like Lacan's mirror stage theory about when animals are first able to recognize their image as their own. And immediately I thought, gotta go back into those fucking old French guys again. And I just could not take any more Lacan in my life. So I settled instead on Emmanuel Levinas. He's more generous and mystical and talks about philosophy as a wisdom of love rather than a love of wisdom. These are just a few of the words I have to look to read his work. I think what he's trying to say, though, is that we can only experience our true infinite nature, and that of others, through relationships. We don't have to fully know the other person as they are in themselves, and we will never fully know them, apart from acting with them. But unless we desire to know and keep trying, we'll never escape the compressing forces of categorization that turn you and me into just things. When I was a little girl, my uncle, old enough to be a mother, young enough to be a mother, took a Polaroid of me, holding 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 a Polaroid of me. And that image became the perfect illustration of my grief for him, mirroring itself in smaller and smaller iterations, and yet stretching infinitely. We shared a face, or eyebrows and face, and a name. I didn't want to talk about grief in the pandemic, so I'll just mention your gray scarf and women's perfume, that heartbreaking rosary story from your ex-girlfriend, and that painting that you did of a priest sucking on a nun's tits that my Mia had no idea what to do with. I miss not the grief, but the rituals. Our face in the funeral home cousin's daughter's face across the room, wearing argos. I got this nose sweet, flauta de nariz, from some South American sound artists who taped microphones to plant stems. It's made from a tree. Those beings with whom we share each breath like lovers. But this is a flauta de nariz doble, made for two people, nose to nose, to make music. I was handed this object, paired with a woman I had never met, and told simply to play. We held the flute between our faces, and hands-free, we danced and breathed, conjoined. I want you to think about, when was the last time you shared breath with a stranger? I'm not right, but I'm so sick of seeing my own face. No post-it note stuff on a computer screen can cover the vanity and self-loathing that become the faces of my inner Janice. God of duality, transitions, doorways, in one side and out the other. He's two-faced, but not necessarily in a bad way, just kind of in a real way. FaceTime commercials even, and even someone else's account of a really sad book. There was that one about the lonely robot that adopted a gosling. I don't try thinking about it. You think I'm bullshitting, but it's a real book. It's called The Wild Robot. She knows what it is. I kiss faces as a queen. To be from such a touch-centric culture and be told to back away is withering. It breaks a generational continuum for our elders to go a year without kisses of children on their cheeks. So many faces have disappeared that I want the ones that remain to be here, face to face, overflowing with the air of words. Their overwhelming presence underlining loss so that it's tangible enough to process. to Michael and Eric. Also, thank you.